of what's coming up.
Okay,
Great.
I think we're going to go ahead and just get started. We're about a minute early, but I always like to give as much time as possible to this because we're always so interested to hear what our state leaders say. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Michael David, who will then introduce his panel. But this is our legislative panel, so we get to hear from state lawmakers and one individual who's not quite yet a state lawmaker, but he's on the Meridian City Council, so I bet he has a lot to say. Okay, so Michael David is going to facilitate this. He is a member of the Idaho Walk Bike Alliance board, and he's also sits on the Ketchum City Council. He's been on the council since 2012, and Michael has a very unique view because of all the challenges that have been coming down Ketchum's way with COVID and housing and everything. So he's really got a great perspective. He is going to moderate the legislative panel. This particular group of panelists today, one has been a legislator for a long time, Senator Ward Engelking. Representative Green, second term, third term? Second term.
Running
okay.
for my third term.
Running for your third term, okay.
Yes.
Our Representative Bundy, I think, will be running for his second term, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, and then Treg is our Meridian City Council member who is a candidate, so he will be in the Senate starting in January. So lots of perspectives, and I'm sure they'll have a lot to say. And when we get to the questions, I am going to ask, if you have a question, you're going to have to come up to the microphone to ask it. So anyway, with that, Michael, you want to take it away?
I will do that. Yeah. So thanks, first of all, to the panelists. Thank you so much for taking time out of your always busy schedules, I know, to be here and help us learn a little bit about what you guys do and how it all works at the Capitol building, and as a candidate, what goes on there for you, and what you're looking forward to. So Cynthia did a good job telling who y'all are, but why don't we just really quickly go down the line, and you can do a quick little introduction of yourself for the people that are listening. We'll start with Representative Bundy. Representative Bundy.
Well, thanks. And first off, I want to thank you. Did you guys hear that? Let me try my different mic. I'm getting it back. Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Thanks. Well, I appreciate the fact that I have the opportunity to speak to you. And I've really enjoyed my freshman term in the House of Representatives. So I've been in it for 2 years. Becoming a legislator was not really something that I really focused on for a long time. I served in the Air Force for 20 years, retired out of Mountain Home Air Force Base, and got to do a lot of great fun things in the Air Force, got to fly jets and do all kinds of things. And I retired and started to teach high school. And you can see, as the part-time legislator, when I'm not legislating, I'm teaching high school still. So that's a tremendous joy in my life. It's really, really something I've enjoyed and been very blessed with. And then about 10 years ago, I got involved in some economic development committees and ended up being appointed to the city council. And then I ran for city council and was elected. And then I used to be in District 23, one of the seats opened up. And so I ran for state representative in District 23 and was fortunate and got elected. And now with redistricting, I'm now going to be in District 8. So I'm going to lose Owyhee County and Twin Falls County. And I live in Mountain Home. So now I have Elmore County, Boise County, Valley County, and Custer County. So as you're envisioning my district in your head, when you transpose Europe over the top, I'm about the size of Belgium. So I'm very fortunate as a freshman to be given the opportunity to be on the JFAC. And so, and I think we're going to talk about a little bit today. One of the really cool things I got to do last session was be the co-sponsor with Senator Woodward on Senate Bill 1359, which was the big transportation budget, where we did some really good things. We put some some money and allocation, some projects where it needs to go. So and I also serve on business and local government, but to be perfectly honest, the JFAC committee is about 80% of my effort. So I'm glad to be here, and Brooke and I work on JFAC together with Senator Engelking, Ward Engelking, and I'm just looking forward to the next session, and I'm glad that you invited me to come. Thanks.
Thanks for being here. Okay, why don't we go then to Representative Green?
Hi guys, thank you so much for the invitation to chat with you. This is my second time appearing with the Idaho Walk Bike Alliance, and to give a little bit of background really quick before I jump into how I got here, but I'm actually a transportation planner by trade with Ada County Highway District, and so it's really exciting when my two hats collide, where I get to be able to speak about my legislative responsibilities and the joys that that brings, but also have it coalesce with my work here as a transportation planner. And so it's exciting to be in that field with a lot of like minds who this topic is incredibly important to. As mentioned earlier, I have just wrapped up my second term. I'm running for my third. I kind of jumped into running for office just by being involved in my community first and foremost before I ever got a chance to be here working as a state representative. And so truly appreciate it. It's certainly a joy. And now that I get to be at the legislature for 2 terms now, I have just recently wrapped up my first term on JFAC with Matt as well as with Janie. And one of the biggest exciting things I think the legislature brings is the people we get to work with. Seldom, do you happen to be in an environment where people really want to do good work, and there are a lot of people who want to work together to help Idahoans. And so, if one of the biggest takeaways from being a legislator and being in office, it's my colleagues. And running into my third term, and especially when we lose some colleagues and we gain some, it's really exciting to look forward to the work that we get to do in the future. Did I just start echoing?
A little bit.
I did, of course I did. So nonetheless, it's exciting to be, like I mentioned, Matt and I actually are on all the same committees together. So from business to local government to JFAC. And as he mentioned, he carried and co-sponsored the bill pertaining to our transportation funding last year. Well, transportation in general is really important to me. And so I do work on the transportation budget and work on very, very many transportation initiatives. That's one nice thing about being a legislator is we are part-time legislators with opportunities and jobs outside of it, and it's really great to bring that perspective to the Capitol when working on bills. And so I look forward to continuing that work and being able to speak primarily on transportation issues in the future, but also being able to continue my day job here at ECHD. So.
Well, thank you for that. While you're not echoing and sounding good, can you tell everyone what JFAC stands for?
Yeah,
I think most of us know, but maybe not everyone.
Just in case, just to give you, it's one of the actually premier committees at the legislature. We're the Joint Appropriation Committee, Joint Appropriation Finance Committee. A good way to look at that is, we set the budgets for the whole state and all the divisions and departments, and agencies associated with it. We're the money team. So we're the ones who are looking at the state budget and making appropriate allocations pertaining to projects and such.
Perfect, thank you. And a good transition into one of the Senate members of that committee as a joint committee, Senator Ward Engelking.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me today. It's a privilege to be here and to be able to visit with you. I will just tell you a little bit about my background. Is I've always been involved in politics. My family was very involved, but I always worked behind the scenes. And I was a classroom teacher for 33 years, and I really didn't even envision ever running. And it wasn't until Prop 1, 2, and 3, sometimes called the Luna laws, were before us that I thought, you know what? There aren't very many educators in the legislature. They don't understand what happens in the classroom, and we need a voice, a strong voice there. So that's when I decided to run. And so I sit, yes, first of all, I'm a minority caucus chair in the Senate, and I sit on JFAC, and this, I think, is my 6th year on JFAC. I've been in the Senate 9 years. So, and I'm also on Commerce and Human Resources, which is the Business Committee, and then Senate Education. And by virtue of being on the Commerce Committee, I'm also on the Change in Employee Compensation for State Employees. So it's, we've got a lot of work. We wear a lot of hats over there. But the reason I'm so excited to be on this panel today is because we need to make sure that we have safe routes to schools, safe pedestrian walking places. And this is really important to us and to me. And I know that Brooke and Matt worked diligently on the transportation bills. There's 20 of us on JFAC, and to be real honest, we kind of divvy up some of the work there. We certainly are involved in all of it, but we really dig into budgets, and we can't dig into every single budget. So we kind of divide that up a little. I work on the education budgets, higher ed, and DEQ and the military budget and some of those. So though I don't dig in deep on the transportation budget, I listen carefully to my colleagues, and we all ask questions, and we work with the directors on these to make sure we get the best budget for the state and that we're not wasting any money. I represent District 18, and so does Brooke, and that is south and southeast Boise. We have Boise State University, and we go to Cunamore Road, which is Elmore County, basically, and we go clear up to Lucky Creek. So it's an interesting geographical district, but it's fun. We work hard every day to listen to constituents and try and do the right thing to make sure that Idaho is on a good path forward.
Fantastic, thanks. And then we have Trey Burnt, who is a Meridian City Council member. And after hearing all that, you're still going to run, Trey, I'm hoping?
Absolutely. There's nothing that's going to stop me now. We're way too deep into this. But my thanks for the invite. Grateful to be here. My name is Trey Burnt, Councilman Trey Burnt. I've been on the Meridian City Council for I'm in my 5th year. I was just reelected this past fall. I've been seriously campaigning for a year and a half. I'm really, truly ready for this to be over with. But grateful to be here. I ran because it was the right time. District 21 changed substantially during redistricting. And because of this change, we needed a senator that could represent Meridian effectively. So that's the reason why I ran. I'm a small business owner. I moved to Meridian back in 2003 from Pocatello, so I'm native Idahoan. So other than that, I'll stop there, and excited to learn and excited to serve.
Fantastic. All right. Well, why don't we get started with some questions? You guys have done a good job explaining kind of your responsibilities in the legislature and your districts. So we can move on to a question that we have. What is the best way for members of the Idaho Walk Bike Alliance, not just board members, but members across the state, to contact you during the session? 23. Why don't we start with
Michael?
Yep.
I'll just jump in there and say,
Perfect.
I mean, you can call us, but probably email is the fastest and most effective. If you call us, somebody will take a message and get it to us eventually, but an email we usually get fairly quickly. I will warn you, we get, sometimes we get hundreds and thousands. So, but I do try to answer all of my emails as quickly as I can. But, and also, if you want to make an appointment, I love seeing constituents. I love meeting in person too. We do have limited time during the day, but we try to block out sometimes where we can meet with people, because that's really where we get our best input.
That's great. Representative Bundy, anything to add to that?
No, I would agree that email is the best way to get hold of us. Telephones, if you see me in the halls at the Capitol, grab me. and we can do there. And I'm also, I'm going to change my contact information. So when the session starts, check my contact information on the website. I'm going to put a cell phone on there so that I can get texts and phone calls right now. Right now, my contact is a landline, and that didn't work out nearly as well as I had hoped. So come January, I'll have a cell phone that I can have pretty much constant access to, but email's the best. And grab me in the hall, because when I see you face to face, it's really easy to figure out a 10-minute time when we can meet, or a lot of times it's right then. So grab me or email me or look at my contact information for a cell number come January.
Great. And Representative Green, do you have anything?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I think one of the easiest ways to get in touch with us is text messaging. And to Matt's point and to Janie's point, during this session, while email seems to be the easiest form to send us a message, the reality is we get over 100, 200 in a day. In one evening, we can come back and just have a ton of email. And so text message is by all means the easiest way. And so to Matt's point, I intend to also update my contact. Cynthia knows how to get a hold of me. Ben Broxton knows how to get a hold of me. If there's some issue that's important or imperative, just send us a text. And why that is because we're sitting in committee while we can't take the phone. We oftentimes see our text messages. The same applies for the floor as well. And while we may have a landline that connects to our office, the reality is we also get a tremendous amount of phone calls. And we usually get some help to check all of those phone calls as well. So, but text message, that is the best way. And certainly, Cynthia has my contact. It's out there. We're going to make sure it's out there, and you can always send that to me.
Fantastic. And someone a couple of you talked about the website. What is the website? And I'm sure it's very helpful for us citizens.
Yeah, no, it's the legislative website that shows all your legislators pertaining to your district. It's, I don't know what it's idaholegislature.org or gov. I'll figure that out, Michael. Send it to Cynthia.
We can Google it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Fantastic.
the last of it's idaho.gov. So legislators, idaho.gov.
Great. Oh, fantastic. I don't know, Treg, if you wanted to add anything about what you're expecting along the lines of how you will, communicate with your constituents.
There's 1,000 different ways to get a hold of me. So I invite anyone who wants to reach out. Love to meet people, love to sit down and learn more. And that's how I've always approached my time on city council. And I don't plan on changing that when I'm in the Senate. So I don't have a legislative email yet. I need to get elected first. I'm sure that will happen right after. So anytime, ton of ways to get a hold of me.
Great.
And Michael, I want to throw out there Twitter as well as Facebook messaging. So,
okay.
And this is for people who are trying to get in touch with us who may not necessarily be down at the legislature or want to schedule a meeting. Twitter through the PM, the direct messaging, I've actually responded to a lot of constituents that way. So.
That's fantastic. And obviously that's one of the wonderful things about being in a small state or a small, not a huge population, is that the accessibility to you and to city council members and everything, that's it makes it a lot better for everyone, I think. So you guys have a lot of finance experience, and last year there was $10 million for the fund the Idaho Child Pedestrian Safety Program, which is administered by LTAC, to build standalone walking and biking infrastructure throughout the state. And those construction ready projects for those communities that applied for those grants are making a big difference. We see them, I know in Blaine County, Carrie had a wonderful project that gets the kids across the highway safely. Will you continue to support additional funding this year for that? And why or why not?
I can go first.
Go for it.
You want me to jump in there?
Sure.
Well, actually, that project is near and dear to my heart because I was the one who requested it from the governor's budget last year. So
Thank you.
thrilled to see it in there. I will tell you, I've already requested of it of this year. And so I'm hoping that we're going to see that same commitment towards these bike and pedestrian enhancements. And partly it's because LTAC brought forward their list of projects that were still outstanding from the previous year. And it became evident that while the congestion mitigation funds at $2 million provides a little bit of a project, maybe sidewalk gaps, our rural communities don't have the leverage to be able to build out large pedestrian enhancements. And so that $10 million gave an avenue for all those rural communities to do that. And so I've asked for it a second time. I'm crossing my fingers that we're going to be able to do that and make that commitment to finishing out. From what I understand, we may have funded 10 million, but I think the demand was up to 17 million. And so there are already projects in the queue ready to go that are shovel ready. They just need the funding in which to do it. And I'm hoping that we're going to be able to duplicate that again this session.
Great.
And
Thank you.
I will
Senator?
just jump in there and say that is also very near and dear to my heart, making sure that children and people have safe ways to get to school, but also to access their community and recreation there. We really need to make sure that happens. And we've got money right now to do it. This is a lot of it's federal money. Some of it's a surplus. We have it available. We need to make sure that our communities take advantage of it and that we have things in place that will last for generations, that will enhance the communities where our children and grandchildren live. So this is near and dear to my heart. I've lobbied the governor's office also. So I'm hoping we're there, and they were very receptive. So we'll just hope that continues to go forward.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I also support these type of projects. When I was a member of the Mountain Home City Council, we put together a large-scale downtown renovation where we combined assets and resources and timing with city resources, ITD resources, Department of Commerce, and LTAC, and we're able to bring all of these agencies in. And when government works together, which everybody thinks impossible, but it's not, because we have a ton of great professionals out there in state government that are doing great things. When you're able to combine these resources, you can do some great things. We, and we're working now in all my new district and around, but Mountain Home, we added new bike lanes, we added new sidewalks, we added, in the past, we've added a walking path. And these things all make a community safer, but much more livable and healthier lifestyles. And so all those things come into play. And when we have the resources and the ability to get people to talk, we can do some great things in these communities, big and small. And so, yeah, I will continue to support these type of efforts to make our cities safer and healthier all at the same time.
And that's great. And the reason you guys are here, have agreed to be here with us here, you're allies in this. We've got a couple of educators and a highway district and person. And so you guys, as you said, have it in your heart and a passion for this. Do you have trouble, though, as we've heard in some of the presentations today, getting some of your colleagues on board with the importance of these monies for infrastructure? Anybody want to chime in?
I can jump in there because I think I spent a lot of time on this topic, and certainly Matt and Janie and Treg, you have a different lens too to look at this, but I don't think necessarily we have a really difficult time recognizing the importance of this, because many of these legislators who come from rural Idaho, they want what's best for their community too, and they see the need as it pertains to being able to walk or bike or get to school safe, and they have accidents and such in their communities that they too also want to ensure the infrastructure is there. I think really what it is just prioritizing this within all of our other projects. And when we make a transportation investment like we have with the funding that just recently came in, the large big chunk of money, a lot of that is going to complete streets per se. It's also going to address bike, head, as well as the roadway enhancements. And so, am I echoing really bad?
A little bit.
Yeah, it comes and goes apparently. I don't think it's been too difficult. The $10 million passed without much of a hitch last year. And so that goes to show that there is a need in these rural communities. It's a value to these other legislators. But something to note about coming into this next session, we have 30 new members. And, while we may have had several colleagues that were close friends to us, they're no longer there. And so one of the tasks that we have to address is meeting our new members coming in, meeting the new tregs, and, getting them acquainted with some of these important issues. But they all come from rural communities. They all see the need to it. $10 million was not too much of a struggle last year getting through. What is just going to be the priority. And can we see that later into the future outside of a surplus year? That's where we're really going to actually do our hard work, is when we don't have the extra dollars to make these investments. But right now we have the money in which to do it. We're doing it appropriately. I think we're in a good place.
Fantastic. And Treg, where on, in your priorities, Meridian has got to be one of the fastest growing cities in the world. And as it's gone on, we'll keep that quiet. No, actually, they told us this morning, yeah, keep them coming. That'll make it the best city it can be. But where is are the priorities in your district for bike and pedestrian infrastructure?
Well, to be honest, my district is pretty established, but believe it or not, although Meridian is growing rapidly, we're still, somewhat of a, in our area of impact, we're somewhat of a rural community. And so it's not uncommon to have large swaths of miles where there's no connectivity. And anyone that comes from local government, Representative Buddy can say this, connectivity is extremely important. Safety is important. So I'll absolutely support these projects and these monies, and I'd be pretty shocked if the governor doesn't recommend these projects in this next upcoming session. So I think yeah, we have nothing to worry about there.
Fantastic.
Mike, can I make
Michael, if I can just add that the Senate also is looking at a minimum of 18 new members. So that is going to, it's going to take a little bit of time to build those relationships and make sure that everybody understands some of the needs that we have in the state. I think they come in with an idea of what their priorities are, but they may not know the whole list of needs that we have. And the only pushback we usually get is sometimes these are federal dollars, and there's a pushback sometimes that we should not be using federal dollars. But I think if we're doing projects that are going to benefit Idahoans for generations to come, I think we're in a good place.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for all your work on that and your continued work. Oh, please do.
I was kind of thinking about when I mentioned our project at Mountain Home, and I also saw this at the state level. Sometimes pushback actually helps us to build a better product. And so, I said we combined, our city project with ITD. It's like we were in the planning process, and somebody said, well, ITD is going to redo the main street that goes through town is a state highway. So let's coordinate when ITD comes in to put in the new road. Rather than us go in and do our downtown renovation and then a year later they tear it up, we combine the resources. And the reason we started to think about that is because we started to get the pushback on how much it was going to cost. And so, we like to get projects through. And I think we see a lot of times when, not especially, but in JFAC, sometimes we'll get pushback on certain things. And we go back to the folks and we tell them where our pushback is, and we relook at it, and we're able to figure out maybe there's something we can do a little bit more effectively, or we can just sharpen our pencil. So I'm okay with pushback because I think it helps to create a better product.
Sure. No, that's great. That's and that's what we're all doing, is representing the people. So that's fantastic. In the past, the Idaho legislature passed the largest ongoing transportation spending bill in the history of Idaho, and the bill basically gave ITD a blank check to spend on whatever projects they saw fit. And wherever they were going to build them. And when that Garvey program was enacted years ago, the legislature had a good idea of what projects were going to happen and when and where. And but it's not the case with the newer funding. Are any of you concerned about the broad authority and kind of lack of details that the money?
Can I make a quick comment as one of the bill sponsors on that?
Please.
Okay. I know that there's a lot of latitude, but I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a blank check. When I look at the fiscal note on Senate Bill 1359, we allocate it to certain areas. And I'll just go through it real quick. The bill provides cash transfers from the general fund. We're going to give $6.5 million to the aeronautics program, $18 million to the strategic initiatives program within ITD, another $210 million that are going to be done to the strategic initiatives that are going to be focused on the local level. And then we did about $19 million to service or to get rid of the Garvey debt service fund. So there is latitude within those. And I saw we had Mr. Wong from the ACHD. So we have folks in there that are involved in the allocation, and Brooke does this and we all do that. So I would be careful of using blank check because we've given it to certain areas and to certain functions. But I do agree within that function, there's some latitude, but there's a tremendous amount of steps that they take to allocate that money. So I like the idea that our job in JFAC was to allocate the money, and then the policy takes place out in the field. So I like the way that we were able to give broad chunks for certain projects that are governed by priorities and by needs. So I don't think we'll be able to do, I don't know if we will or not. I mean, it'd be great if we could do another bill like this next year, but there's some targeted aspects to this. I think the aeronautics is good. We've got smaller runways around the state. We're seeing some growth in our ability to bring airplanes and traffic and things like that in. Oh, and I forgot to mention that there's money directed for the improvement of the Port of Lewiston. So there's a lot of strategic placement of these funds. So that was just kind of the comment I wanted to make in our statement of purpose in the fiscal note. There's some directives in there.
That's great. How about Representative Green? Why don't you go next?
Fabulous. Yeah, I want to jump in here because I think it's incredibly important to Matt's points pertaining to kind of how that allocation and the division of that allocation was done. One thing we also have to do as policymakers is we look to the policy and the funding piece, and that is our job at the state level. One of the things we have to be incredibly cautious about is when we start to dig in about a particular project, especially at the state level. In the House, you've got 70 members who have several different opinions on how allocation of those dollars should be to their district. And when you start to name certain projects associated with those allocations, then we're really overstepping our boundaries as a policy piece. We're really getting into the operational portion. ITD does a phenomenal job. They have the ITIP. It's a 7-year, trajectory of how they intend to spend their dollars on pertaining to specific projects. Same thing pertains to, local highway districts such as ACHD and their 5-year work plan. We have to oftentimes look to the experts in the field who do the operational piece, who prioritize, who plan, and who actually construct these projects. But at the state level, the last thing you want us doing is sitting here and saying, these dollars need to be allocated for this project for this reason. And partly it's because you're going to get a division amongst our colleagues. They're going to dig their heels in, and they're going to become incredibly protective of those projects. And as a result, could actually prevent those bills or those dollars being allocated from moving forward. So we have to look to those who are the experts in the field, who do the operational piece, who can execute and construct on those projects and plan them accordingly. ITD has it with their ITIP. Their board are actually appointed, by our governor. And so we also have that checks and balance. But with the allocation that just occurred, it was divided according to which, Port of Lewiston, or let it be to ITD's road maintenance or deferred programs or airports. Those entities, those agencies should be the ones to make the determination what is shovel ready, what is in construction phase, and when it should be allocated. But we as policymakers, that's the last thing you want us doing is getting to the operational piece.
Great. Senator?
Thank you, Michael. I would just add that we are a budgetary committee, and we try to stay in our lane and not do policy. But I will tell you that we have a very close contact with all the agencies, and there is oversight, and there will be oversight on these projects. We just finished a fall JFAC tour where we actually went out and visited some of the projects that we have funded in the past or are currently funding. So there is oversight, but we do try to put that money out there in the places that we think it will do the most good. We listen to our directors, our agency heads, and we trust that they've done their due diligence. If there is a problem later, we'll revisit it, but it may seem like a blank check, but it really isn't. We are very strategic in how we target that money and make sure that it's doing good things for Idaho.
That's great. And some of us in the walking and biking world sometimes feel we're a little sensitive when we see some of the money that's put into highway projects, and when we're trying to rub some nickels together. So I really appreciate you guys doing the work that you're doing, because the money is so needed. For 2 years, a bill was introduced to eliminate driver training program requirements, including night driving hours. The IWBA believes that these programs are critical. The last session talked about safe routes to school and how education, both on the driver side as well as on the bike and pedestrian side, teaching our young drivers the rules of the road. Now I'm echoing. Will you talk a little bit about that, and if you'll continue to support the drivers training program?
Well,
Anybody?
Michael, I'm not as familiar with his bill as my good friends, but without knowing the details, I mean, it seems pretty reasonable, right? I mean, like, I have 3 kiddos and I know how they drive, and it doesn't happen overnight, you know? So,
Exactly.
So I think that, driving experience is pretty important. So that's all I'll have to say about it.
Oh, that's great. Anybody else?
and Michael, if I can jump in there, it does come through
Yep.
the Senate Ed Committee, and there was a reduction in the number of hours, which was upsetting to me, but we looked at surrounding states and tried to find that sweet spot. But I believe driver's education is absolutely imperative for our students. We need to make sure that's available to everybody, and that we have the funds dedicated to help them be able to take advantage of that. As fast as our state is growing, we have tremendous increase in traffic. And we're also, have to recognize that students are used to having a cell phone in their hand 24/7, and that can be very distracting. So any type of instruction we can give them to make them realize how dangerous that is really positive, in my opinion.
That's great. Thanks. Go right ahead, Representative Green.
Great. I can add to this, and for Trig's information, there was, and for others, there was a bill, and I recall it being floated around last year, just to eliminate driver's ed altogether, and that parents could do the work on behalf. And so while I recognize rural communities, because of the struggles pertaining to workforce and being able to have the readily available training, it did not get any movement, but I did talk to the gal who was carrying it, and it came from Northern Idaho. There was a proponent up in Northern Idaho who's trying to push it. No, I'm not going to support eliminating driver's ed, especially in an urban environment where we have the density in which we have, especially the number and unfortunately the number of young lives we lose to accidents as a result of distracted driving. I think it's imperative that we have a really robust system in which they can actually participate in training. While I also recognize that there was a bill that came forward, maybe not last session, but the session prior, pertaining to the reduction of the hours. Something I do want to highlight just in general, as you guys talk about how you can be engaged and plugged in, and in particular to this bill, because that bill for the reduction of hours, actually, I suspect that one that year came through business. And I remember sitting on business on the House side, and nobody testified against it. While I don't necessarily know why that was the case, and I think it was because it came really quick, and it wasn't until it got to the Senate side that people started to get plugged in and started to realize what was happening. Participation in butts and seats. And I call that out because your participation, your butt in the seat in those communities is incredibly important when issues like this come forward, especially if it's something that the Idaho Bike Alliance gets behind, or you as just a bike and cyclist out in our community. Showing up and testifying and giving us an opinion is your opportunity to speak to your elected officials from all over the state. And so I want to encourage it, because this bill in particular, and I recall, I think that there was a gal who approached me afterwards going, what happened with this is like, you should have showed up in committee. We need to hear you in committee when these bills come forward. While I recognize they come quick, and that's the course of the legislature, your participation and being present is probably the best way in which you can advocate for change.
That's great.
It's funny on this bill. I remember, I think I was sitting on the floor because I tend to, I don't spend a lot of time on the office. I like to sit on the floor to do my computer work. And it's like, my phone just starts to ring and it's like, why is the high school calling me? It's like the whole driver's ed department called me at the same time when they heard about it. And it was, I think they even got word of the RS. So they knew about it before I did. And my point there is kind of what Brooke is talking about is, when we're focused on our committees and we're building budgets, there's stuff going on in the other committees that we're not in tune with, not meaning that, we're not ignoring it. You just don't know. And so this is where, you come to the committee meeting or you reach out to us when you see the RS or the idea being floated. Because a lot of times what do we have? Over 800 bills in the last 2 years. And there's no way that we can track all 800 bills. And so it helps when a concerned person like yourself or somebody calls us and says, hey, I need you to look at whatever. And then we can take our attention and we can go do it. And we can get allies, or we can show where we think that it might not be the best idea. But yeah, I remember that one specifically because I had no idea that it was out there, and I got like 3 phone calls within 20 minutes.
Sure. Some of us may hear about these bills before you do if you're not on that committee. So that goes back to what we were talking about as a way to contact you and contact our representatives. So that's that insider baseball stuff is cool. Is cool to hear. There's so much more to it than meets the eye, I think. So that's great to hear that. What other transportation related issues do you see coming in 23? Are there any that are on the horizon coming up, or that you think? Anybody want to take a stab at that?
I'll take a stab at it.
Take it away.
I've heard that more funding for local bridge projects around the state are going to be a pretty big deal. Also, continued discussions on transit options. I don't know how far that will get, but obviously that's an important issue as well.
Great.
And I would just echo that. One of the things that keeps coming up in the Treasure Valley here is the need for some more mass transit, maybe some rail transit. If you've been on the freeway and at traffic hour, you know how bad it can get. And I don't see that changing unless we get a component that deals with mass transit. Now, whether or not that's now or later, I hope we at least start the conversation, get the plan in place, and then we can begin to look for the funding. But we need a plan for how we're going to address this in Treasure Valley, because it's going to be critical in the future. And I don't want to be behind the 8 ball where we're tearing up things to get things done, or rerouting or destroying communities. We need to get this in place now and planned out for the future.
Fantastic. Anything else? Go. Yep.
I can add to it. I do believe we're going to see another push for additional bike ped dollars coming down the pipeline. We already know that that's likely to end up there. One of the things that we have going for us is the fact that we do have this large surplus, and in the years in which we have this robust amount of dollars, making that investment into infrastructure gives us a long-term result, right? We're able to see this for our children's future, where we're able to build our roads out. Maintenance dollars is also going to be coming down the pipeline. We were already behind when we made that allocation last year for these dollars. We were incredibly behind in our deferred maintenance. And so I suspect we'll see another push for additional dollars to address our deferred maintenance costs. I know one of the things potentially is I do believe broadband and transportation go hand in hand. And so I intend to continue that effort pertaining to this Dig Once policy and kind of cleaning it up. That's something I intend to work on. But as a whole, we're going to have transportation dollars being put forward, I suspect. So I don't want to daylight anything before it actually happens. So I'm making a lot of assumptions.
Representative Bundy, do you have any guesses?
No, I think we're just going to continue on the funding. I was also just looking, Treg mentioned bridges and things like that. The 1359, the funding for that just was put in place on 1 July. So I think we're going to start to see some of the specific local bridge funding in this bill. And then, whatever we don't spend, then we get the opportunity in JFAC. Sometimes we allocate money and then we create carryovers and through lines for that. So I think Treg has heard that because there is specific money out there in the strategic initiatives program for bridges and those. And if we've all been up Valley County or Pickett County anymore, our bridges need some work. So yeah, I think that that's going to be a big push, like you guys have all talked about, is infrastructure and the need, because when deferred maintenance is a huge issue, because it's just like your car. The longer you wait to fix your car, the more it costs, and it's the same, if not worse, with our infrastructure and our roads and things like that. So yeah, I think we're going to look at the allocation of money this time and possibly some carryover into the next budgets. And so I think that's going to be a very important part of the next year or two, is the proper implementation of this big record-breaking budget that we had this year, that it's going to might take us a more than 1 year to spend it out.
Great. Well, now we've got our crystal balls out, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to maybe talk about non-transportation issues that you see coming up. Everyone has mentioned, I think, the large turnover and building those relationships. Any other fun for the press or fun for you non-transportation issues? Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Michael. Well, I think just as a result of the special session, and I think Brooke and Matt will agree, and I'm hoping Treg will be on board with this, but we've got $330 million that's going into a bucket for K-12 funding, and also $80 million for higher ed funding. And I'm hoping that we'll take a look at that and really be strategic in how we allocate that so that it works for schools and for students here in Idaho. And also, the reality is everything that we do in education has an implication in business, because the workforce that need here in the state of Idaho is great. And so we need to make sure that we've got our students ready to go into the workforce and that they stay in Idaho. And so my hope is that we'll look carefully at that money. We know that we have tremendous facility needs in Idaho, and with the skyrocketing property taxes, we are not able to pass bonds to build new schools. And so we're going to have to look at some of this surplus, maybe some of that $330 million plus, and we need to look at, can we put that in some kind of revolving fund that works for school districts so that they can build or renovate schools and have them state of the art instead of poor or in worse condition. 70% of our traditional public schools were built in the 60s and 70s, and they're aging out, and we need to either totally revamp them or we've got to build new schools. And so I'm hoping that's part of it. We know that we have a problem with with being able to keep our teachers here in the state and attract people into the profession. So that's another area. But those are just some real quick things, because that happened in the special session.
Right. Representative Green.
Yeah, I can add to that because I want to dovetail off with the revolving loan program concept. And I bring that up because infrastructure opportunities in other states use that similar model in which to build out the roads. It's, they call them infrastructure banks in other states. But here in Idaho, we have a really good program in place for DEQ, for water projects. And it's a revolving loan program where growth pays for itself through, the interest accrued as a result of putting out those dollars for projects. So I think it's a tremendous way in which to explore the potential construction of schools and taking that burden off of property taxes. It's an idea floating out there. I think it's a tremendous one and something that should be considered. Going into the next session, I also believe that we're going to find a lot of conversation. Let's just say it, but we have the social issues. We know they're coming back. We know that they're going to come hard and fast. And especially with the new set of legislators coming in that, either campaigned off of them, within their platforms and such. There's no doubt we're going to have those conversations. Although I like to shift it to having more conversations pertaining to housing and workforce development. One of the biggest struggles we're facing here in Idaho is our workforce. And when we talk about transportation and we talk about spending all those dollars, if we don't have the workforce in which to actually, the manpower to do the job, we're not going to spend those dollars many of our rural communities need. And so workforce and housing are imperative that somehow we get very innovative in our approach. We continue to work with our industries to figure out a way for a pipeline for our workforce, from higher ed or from the trades or from apprenticeships. But we need to get people working here in Idaho on these projects and being able to develop our core workforce, which we unfortunately has shrunk significantly in the past 2 years. Those, I think, workforce development, broadband, dollars spent on infrastructure, and of course, those high topic social issues, which I don't even need to bring them up because we all know what they are. They will be leading the conversation, I suspect, right out of the gate. But I'm hoping that we can spend our good time with our good colleagues working on the really big issues that pertain to Idahoans that are hitting their pocketbooks. And that's where I'd like to spend my time.
Sure. Treg, what about you as a candidate? Oftentimes when you're running, it's because you see something that hasn't been done or something that affects your district. What do you have? Let's assume you're going to win, because we all think you're going to win. And what do you see coming down the pipe?
Well, no one wants to hear an overbearing big shot talk a lot about what he may or may not know. So I'm not going to get too far in front of myself. On my list was Ed. Senator Ward Endelking hit it perfectly. So I'll stop there. I'm going to learn and I'm going to grow, and I'll be that nerdy guy in the corner just learning how the process works.
Oh, that's great.
We've all been there.
Got to start
We've
somewhere.
all been there.
Representative Bundy, do you have anything you want to add? Any good guesses, educated guesses from an educator?
Well, it's funny that a couple of our other folks that brought up the building of schools. I'm actually on the interim committee where we're dealing with that issue and trying to find out some different ways that we can maintain or fix or, take schools down to the foundation and bring them back up. So we're meeting about every 2 weeks until January to see if we can get some things together and some ideas together. And one of the main reasons we want to do this is, I have to chuckle as I'm sitting here in my classroom that everybody's talking about the average building was built in the 70s, and I'm sitting in a building that was built in 1952. So we're even behind that. But it's becoming very difficult. And, since we've moved and shifted the total cost of these new buildings to the property taxes, then you have the property tax problem. So if we're able to figure some things out where we can help people with their property taxes, help the growth, and it's a big thing. And I think, Brooke mentioned some other issues that we're going to be dealing with right off the bat. And I think that's true. I think we're going to be looking at some federalism type of issues, but dealing with the federal government and the state government and whose job is it to look at certain topics and how we interact. So I think we're going to see some, and we just tend to call them federalism issues with the division of powers between the two levels. I think we're going to see some issues that we're going to try to hammer out, because obviously as Idahoans, we want Idahoans to be the primary source of these things. But we also realize in certain areas that it's a federal issue. So you kind of have to figure out which is the best level. It's kind of like cities and counties in the state. We all have our desires and our needs, but sometimes different things are handled best at different levels. So I think we're going to spend some time hammering some of those issues out.
And
Well,
Michael, if I
please do.
sorry.
That's
was just
okay.
gonna
Please
add-
add.
I was just going to add one more thing. We had an opportunity to hear from some superintendents throughout the state, and I also visited some schools this summer. And one superintendent told me that they plugged a coffee pot in, and it blew the whole electrical system in their building. So we know we've got some problems we've got to deal with, and so I'm just hoping that we look at that surplus and try to use it wisely and plan.
Well, that's great. Thank you guys. All of this information is very helpful, and it educates us and gives us a chance to hear what you have to deal with. And I think what's really promising is that transportation, mobility, housing, education, the big ones, yes, with the other ones may get the press coverage, but that you guys, especially with the finances, are concentrating on those things that are so important to all of us. So thank you for that. Cynthia, do we have some time for some questions?
Thanks, Michael, and thanks to the panel. Does anybody have a question here in the, okay, good. I was going to say, come on down. So Commissioner Hansen has a question for the panel. I'll let him ask.
Thanks very much. There's one piece of legislation that didn't get talked about. 30 years ago, local government was given the authority to pass impact fees to pay for things like transportation. But the way in which the impact fees statute is written, it can't be used to help any of the kind of things that the Walk Bike Alliance is working on. Just a few blocks from here, there's a whole bunch of new apartment buildings that have been built. And we're seeing this. There's some really great infill that's going on, not just in this city, but in other cities. Those developers are paying impact fees for transportation, but then they're being told they cannot be used to pay for anything that is needed in that area for walking or biking or catching a bus. They have to be spent to expand capacity, and sometimes that capacity for the roadway is miles and miles and miles away. So the legislation has been brought in RS form to say, let's at least let the local authorities use their impact fee for transportation on all forms of transportation in the right of way. And so far, the bill hasn't even been printed. So I'm asking for your support. Are you willing to help there's very few tools local government has. We kind of wait for tools to come along and we hold our breath for a long time. But at least we do have this tool that was given 30 some years ago, but it's limited. Would you allow us to use it for all forms of transportation and not just limit it to expanding roadways where there are no roadways anywhere near these new developments that are going to be expanded? So they got to pay for them way away.
Thank you for that. Anybody want to take a shot at it?
So I'll just say
Go
one
ahead.
thing really quick. I'm going to declare Rule 80 and sit this one out and let my colleagues answer. And for those who don't know what a Rule 80 is, it's a inherent conflict of interest for the time being. So I'll wait till the bill arrives in front of me before I commit to anything. But I do think that the conversation is occurring. I know that there has been an initiative for some time pertaining to what our allocations of impact fees are and the scope of how those are applied. But one thing really important, and I haven't seen this bill and I haven't seen this RS by all means, but something important to recognize is while we have that conversation, I'm not committing to anything until I see the bill and be able to read the content, but I also have to inherently recognize that there may be a conflict of interest and I'll have to declare a Rule 80. So
great. Sandra?
Well, I would just say I too would want to see an RS. I haven't seen one yet, and so I'd want to see what this involves. I do know that there are certain things that when you build a new subdivision, you do have to do, and I don't know how this dovetails with that and whether this would be a positive thing. I assume it would be, but I'd want to look at the RS, and it's something I haven't seen. So I can't really weigh in very easily on this.
Thanks. Yeah, we understand that. I think it's what I take from that question and the impact fees issue is that it's all related to mobility, and it's all related, the schools, all everything, where the schools are located and how the kids get to school, everything's so interrelated. So yeah, I think that you got to look at all ways to get creative and find some funding. Cynthia, anyone else, or you want to add something, Matt?
I do. I totally empathize with the gentleman's comment that sometimes the city folks, the city leaders just wait for tools to be kind of given to them. And I agree. That seems like Treg's on the city council, and a lot of times the cities are just waiting for certain things to happen. I would encourage also to be proactive in talking with DEQ, ITD, and other things like that to get in the know on grants that are out there, projects that you can piggyback on and things like that. Because I feel like when you're at the city level, sometimes you're just waiting for the tools, and that's just kind of the nature of it. You need that. But that said, every so often, if you push the right button, you can find some projects that are available through Commerce or ITD or DEQ. So I would encourage that gentleman to do those things. But I do understand his concern with sometimes it feels like you're just waiting for the assets or the resources to trickle down to you, for lack of a better word. So I appreciate his comments.
Great. Cynthia, you want any more? Or it looks like we're close to 4 o'clock.
We only have 1 minute. This is Elaine Clegg. I hope you don't
There
mind
she
if I
is.
one quick question. The question is, Senator Ward Engelking talked about transit, perhaps regional rail in this region, given the congestion we're seeing on the freeway and the costs that we're incurring to widen roads. I wondered if any one of you had any ideas about how you would support paying for that so that we can actually do it, because I think a lot of us would like to.
I'll answer that. And honestly, it's not a shock to see Council President Clegg there. She's been a true patriot for transportation in our valley for a long, long time. And she would probably be one of the first that I would reach out to have a conversation about this. I was getting my hair cut this morning. I don't normally look this fresh, but I was getting my hair cut this morning. And my barber asked me about this, and this is something that he's extremely interested in, as is many folks in the Treasure Valley. I think that would be, and we've been working on rails with trails. I was once a parks commissioner way back in the day, and so these conversations have been happening for a long, long time. At the end of the day, it's just a matter of how we're going to fund them, and I'm definitely open to that discussion personally.
Senator?
Well, I'm hoping with the infrastructure bill that we saw pass through the Congress, it's my understanding there is some money there. It may not be enough, but it might be some seed money to get some things started. I know there's been some discussion about some rail traffic from Salt Lake to Boise. Maybe we can piggyback off that and extend it to Nampa. We had rail traffic, and rail access at one point. I do know that people need to be able to live where they work. And right now, for a lot of our folks, it's just not possible. And so they're making that horrendous commute, paying high gas prices, and it's really hurting them. And so anything we can do to accelerate that, I'm happy to work with anybody who has the ideas, and maybe we can find that money.
Yes, Brooke.
Yeah, hey, certainly this is a project that I'm quite familiar with. One of the things we also have to look at is the policy pieces that in my opinion, have handicapped us that are already in existence. One really good policy, and one that, I'm determined to get changed by the time I'm out, is, HOA lanes, high occupancy vehicle travel lanes in Idaho are only reserved for populations under a certain threshold. And so when we get to areas such as State Street, or we get to areas such as the interstate, we can't use them because our state policy state has already put a threshold of minimum. I mean, I think if I recall, it's like 25,000 or less, which is just absurd. So those are some other opportunities that we need to go and change and address policy pieces. One of the things also is looking to our partnerships. While we have rail, we don't necessarily own it. Union Pacific does, and so that's an integral piece of this puzzle, is being able to have that conversation with them, but also looking to the right of way next to the rail. There's a really good idea that was floated that I think it's worth exploring because it's a more affordable option, is looking at bus rapid transit along or adjacent to the rail. Asphalt's much cheaper to put in place than already rail is. And so could we put in asphalt and could we drive bus rapid transit along that corridor into our downtown core? Is that going to generate enough volume of people interested in using it? Maybe that's a good exploration we can go. But to the funding piece, I'm incredibly in support of funding transit. I think we need a local option tax, for people to actually invest in. Will we get it? I don't know. Everything's up in the air. We have 30 new members coming in on the House side, but we know in Ada County, congestion is incredibly problematic. And back to the affordable housing piece, one of the issues about housing is affordability. If we give a cheaper alternative for transportation, and you make that commute more affordable and shorter, then people have an option to buy homes in, say, CUNA or in some of our rural outlying communities. And so while we address transit, we also have an opportunity to address affordable housing. They do go hand in hand, and I look forward to help advocating for that. I know these folks online also could do the same. So,
no, that's great. Any final thoughts on this issue or just in general? Thanks so much. It doesn't look like it. Thanks so much again for being with us and for doing what you do. I know it's not always a thankful job, and the pay is not great either, but luckily, yes, Cynthia.
Okay,
Cynthia?
we have one more question. Do the
Oh, okay.
legislators have a few minutes to stay and answer just one last question from somebody? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Brady.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here and giving us your time and your knowledge about these subjects. It's not easy to learn these things. I have a pretty simple question, I think. What will it take for the funding for the Child Pedestrian Safety Act to become permanent? As a safe routes educator and listening to my safe routes people across the state, there's not one city in Idaho that isn't affected by this. So what will it take?
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Lisa.
Wow.
Did I lead that conversation?
Sure.
I pitched it to the governor's office for inclusion into their budget last year and again this year. I think more importantly, what's going to take and what's going to draw the attention from our colleagues is showing the use over a period of time. Well, last year we were able to highlight that we could spend $10 million on bike and pedestrian enhancements throughout, all of Idaho. We're able to showcase that there was $7 million still outstanding in projects that were shovel ready to go. This year, we go back to the table again. We showcase that we can spend $10 million on these projects, that rural Idaho is getting the benefit from it. Once we show that the use and that we have shovel-ready projects in all of our communities, I think that sell is going to be a little bit easier for my colleagues to stomach. Ideally, we'd love to see that this is a permanent fixture in our budget moving forward. It is going to take legislation to make that happen. Right now, we're able to do it through budget allocation. But what does that look like? It's going to be showcasing that we can get these dollars, spend them, have the projects ready, and we actually have impactful results in our communities, and not just Ada County, but impactful results in Declo and Horseshoe Bend and Garden Valley, small communities who are seeing the value of this investment. That is going to speak volumes with my colleagues and make this permanent in the future. Are we there yet? I think we need a couple more years to showcase that we can make this happen, and we've done an incredible job through LTAC's allocation and their project management. I think we can see this in the future.
And I would just add to that that is a policy piece, and so it does need to go through our policy committees. We can allocate money. We can't set policy, or we shouldn't anyway. We may have in the past a time or two, but it gets us in trouble. So Anyway, the goal, I guess, would be to, as we see these projects get finished, we can showcase how much they're doing for each of those communities and how much they're enjoyed by the people that live there.
Supporting a
people that
Democrat in
visit
Idaho.
there. And I think we can move it forward then.
Fantastic. Matt, any last final thoughts?
No, I appreciate what Janie and Brooke said on that, and we'll just kind of keep working on it and plugging away on it. So no, that's about it. Thank you.
Fantastic. And you can always count on Cynthia to get a couple powerhouses to close out the whole thing with great questions. And thanks again. And I'll throw it back to you, Cynthia.
So before Cynthia gives her final thoughts, I've watched her work on this conference for the last at least 2 months. She's worked really hard on it, and I'd like y'all to give her a shout out for the hard work and the success that she's had in putting this together.
And Pat, thank you to you too. I know you have you've done quite a bit of work yourself too. So yeah, it's amazing how much it takes to put on an event like this, especially when you're doing half of it virtually and half of it in person. So kudos and congrats and thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you, Pat. For those of you who don't know, Pat is on my board and he has a desk in our office. So if you ever want to visit with him, he's almost always there at the office at his desk working. I crack the whip. Hey, Michael, thank you so much for your great facilitation. We appreciate it. I want to thank the legislators. They are not getting paid right now to do this, and they're doing this because they care about the issue and they welcome input from constituents. And it's really, really important that we continue these conversations. I encourage all of you to get to know your legislators, at least your own legislators, and come on up here and spend some time and we can go to some committee hearings and testify on some bills. So it's we're very lucky in Idaho. We have easy access to our lawmakers. So it's something we're very fortunate about. Before we finish up, I want to just give a shout out to two people who helped the Idaho Walk Bike Alliance. We have an amazing lobbyist, Ben Broxham, who's sitting in the back. Hi, Ben.
Hey, Ben.
And Peyton, who works with him, who I know is the brains behind the operation, but we'll let it go for now. They are a politics. And we cannot have success without these two people. So I just want to say thank you to you. Thank you to the legislators who were. Oh, that's Oli. That's the dog Oli. It's Molly's dog. Thank you to the legislators who participated today. They were incredible and I know they're busy. And thank you to all of you for spending the day with us. This was a lot of fun. We should do this more often. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thanks.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.